The lingering scent of expensive perfume mingled with the unmistakable aroma of family betrayal at the Westbrook Grand Hotel. The annual Chen family reunion was proceeding without me, a carefully orchestrated display of wealth and status that would fill Instagram feeds for weeks to come. Little did they know, I had just made a phone call that would turn their perfect weekend into chaos. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I stood alone in my apartment, staring at the email that had arrived just hours earlier. Final reminder, your presence is not required, the subject line read. The capital letters, a deliberate choice by my older sister Victoria. The message was clear, the family had voted, and I wasn't welcome at this year's lavish reunion. Apparently, my recent life choices didn't align with the Chen family image. At 28, I was the youngest of 4 siblings, and the only one who had veered from our parents' carefully mapped career trajectory. While Victoria dominated the fashion industry with her luxury brand, my brother Alexander managed a hedge fund that catered to the ultra-wealthy, and my sister Olivia had married into one of the most influential political families on the East Coast. Meanwhile, I had abandoned a promising career in finance to pursue hospitality management, a decision that my family viewed as throwing away my Ivy League education and family connections. "You're choosing to be a glorified receptionist," Victoria had sneered during our last family dinner 6 months ago. "With your Stanford MBA, you could be running a division at Alexander's firm, not checking people into hotel rooms." The irony that I was actually developing revolutionary hospitality management software was lost on them. They'd stopped listening to the details of my career years ago, preferring instead to focus on what they perceived as my failure to maintain the Chen family standard of success. I scrolled through the email again, lingering on the section that detailed the upcoming weekend at the Westbrook Grand, a 5-star resort nestled in the mountains of Colorado. "The presidential suite has been reserved for Mom and Dad, with connecting luxury suites for immediate family members," Victoria wrote. "We'll have exclusive access to the South Wing, private dining with Chef Marconi, and mountain excursions arranged for the weekend." What Victoria didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I was the reason they had secured this impossible reservation in the first place. As the behind-the-scenes developer of Reservation, the proprietary booking system used by the world's top luxury hotels, I had relationships with hospitality executives that even Victoria's fashion industry connections couldn't touch. My phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram. Victoria had posted a photo of her boarding a private jet, designer luggage strategically visible in the frame. "Family time is the best time. #Chen Reunion 2025, #Westbrook Grand, #Family First," the caption read, complete with a heart emoji that felt more like a dagger given the email sitting in my inbox. Alexander had commented, "Save me some of that 50-year McAllen," while Olivia had added, "Can't wait to see everyone." Except those who weren't invited, of course. The subtle dig was followed by a winking emoji, as if exclusion were a private joke rather than a deliberate wound. I closed Instagram and opened my contacts, scrolling to a name that my family would never recognize. Sebastian Reynolds, Global Operations Director for the Pinnacle Luxury Hotel Group, which owned the Westbrook Grand and 30 other exclusive properties worldwide. "Sophia," Sebastian answered on the second ring, his British accent warm and familiar. "To what do I owe this pleasure?" "That Chen family reservation at the Westbrook this weekend," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I need it canceled." "Your family's reservation?" Sebastian clarified. "The presidential suite and South Wing takeover? That's nearly a $45,000 booking, Sophia." "Yes," I confirmed. "And I'm the one who arranged it through the back channels, though they don't know that. They think Victoria's assistant managed it." "Ah," Sebastian said, understanding immediately. In the 3 years we'd worked together implementing Reservation across the Pinnacle Group, he'd heard enough about my family to understand the complexity of the situation. "May I ask what happened?" "They explicitly uninvited me from the family reunion," I said. Victoria sent out an email stating my presence wasn't required after a family vote. The line went quiet for a moment. "Well," Sebastian finally said, "as you know, we're fully booked this weekend with a waiting list a mile long. If the Chen reservation were to be cancelled, We would immediately fill those rooms with guests from our priority list. That's what I'm counting on, I replied. Consider it done, Sebastian said. Though I should warn you, your sister's assistant has been particularly demanding throughout this process. This won't be received well. I'm counting on that too, I admitted. After ending the call, I walked to my window overlooking the San Francisco skyline. 3 years ago, I had walked away from a guaranteed 7-figure position at my brother's firm to develop reservation software that would revolutionize luxury hospitality. My family had viewed the decision as a catastrophic downgrade, the equivalent of a surgeon choosing to become a nurse's aide. What they didn't know was that Reservation had quietly become the industry standard, adopted by the top 15 luxury hotel chains worldwide. Or that I had declined acquisition offers from tech giants that would have made me wealthier than all of my siblings combined. Or that next week, Forbes would be announcing their "true under 30 inches list in technology, with my name and face prominently featured. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my friend Rachel. Did you see Victoria's post? Are you really not going to the reunion? I wasn't invited, I texted back. What? Rachel replied immediately. But it's your family. Apparently I'm bad for the Chen brand image, I wrote, but don't worry, I've taken care of it. What did you do? Rachel asked, adding a wide-eyed emoji. Just watch Victoria's Instagram tomorrow, I replied. As if on cue, my phone rang. Victoria's name flashed across the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then listened as her controlled, professional voice devolved into barely contained fury. Sophia, I've just received a call from the Westbrook Grand informing me that our entire reservation has been canceled. They claim they're completely booked and cannot accommodate us on any alternative dates this month. This is unacceptable. I need you to call me back immediately. I smiled at the panic in her voice. Victoria, who prided herself on flawless execution and perfect planning, was facing a very public failure. The Chen family reunion, which she had been promoting on social media for weeks, was now in jeopardy, and she had no idea why. My phone lit up again with a text from Alexander. Fix this. Now. As if I were still the little sister who could be commanded to solve problems without question or acknowledgement. Before I could put my phone down, it rang again. This time it was my mother, her contact photo showing her perfect smile and impeccable appearance. I hesitated, then answered. Sophia, she said immediately, her voice tight with anxiety. There's been a terrible mistake with the hotel. Victoria is beside herself. I heard, I said neutrally. She left me a voicemail. You need to help her fix this, Mom continued. You work in hotels. Surely you can call someone and sort this out. The irony of being excluded from the family gathering but expected to solve the crisis wasn't lost on me. I'm sorry, Mom, but I can't help. I wasn't invited, remember? The family voted. There was a long pause. That was Victoria's idea, she finally said, lowering her voice as if afraid of being overheard. Your father and I would never exclude you. But you went along with it, I pointed out. And now you're calling because you need something from me. Sophia, please, she said, her voice taking on the hint of a tremor that she usually reserved for persuading difficult clients or encouraging large donations to her charity events. 26 family members are flying in from around the world. We have nowhere to stay. I'm sure Victoria will figure something out, I said. She's always been so good at managing the family image. This isn't like you, Mom said, her voice hardening slightly. You've always been the one who helps, who compromises. When did you become so vindictive? I'm not being vindictive, I replied calmly. I'm simply respecting the family's decision to exclude me. If I'm not welcome at the reunion, then I'm certainly not obligated to fix your accommodation crisis. Quote, so you did cancel it, Mom said, the accusation clear in her voice. How could you even do that? Victoria's assistant made those arrangements months ago. Did she? I asked. Are you sure about that? Before Mom could respond, I heard my father's voice in the background asking for the phone. A moment later, his authoritative tone filled my ear. Sophia, this childish behavior stops now, he said. Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Now fix this reservation problem immediately." "I can't," I said. "You mean you won't," he corrected. "No, Dad. I mean I can't. The Westbrook is fully booked with a waiting list. Those rooms have already been reassigned to other guests. There's nothing to fix." "Then find us another hotel," he demanded. "Something comparable." I almost laughed at the impossibility of his request. The Westbrook Grand was booked solid for months, as was every other luxury property within a 100-mile radius. This was peak season, and my family had just lost accommodations that had taken significant behind-the-scenes influence to secure in the first place. "I'm sure Victoria and her team can handle it," I said. "After all, I'm just the family disappointment who works in hotels, right? The glorified receptionist who threw away her potential?" The silence that followed told me my words had hit their mark. My father, always quick with a response, seemed genuinely speechless. "Sophia," he finally said, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain, "what exactly do you do at that hotel job of yours?" It was the first time in 3 years that anyone in my family had actually asked about my work with genuine curiosity rather than thinly veiled disappointment. "I don't work for a hotel, Dad," I said. "I never did. I'm the founder and CEO of Reservation Technologies. We develop proprietary reservation and operations software for luxury hotels worldwide. The Westbrook Grand is one of our flagship clients." Another long silence followed, broken only by what sounded like my mother asking questions in the background. "And you? You had something to do with our original reservation?" he asked slowly. "I arranged it personally as a favor, even though I knew I wasn't invited. I pulled strings with the global operations director because the Westbrook has been fully booked for this weekend for over a year." "I see," Dad said, though his tone suggested he was still processing this information. "And now you've pulled those strings in the opposite direction." "The strings were mine to pull," I confirmed. "You can't exclude me from the family and still expect to benefit from my connections." I heard my mother's voice again in the background, more insistent this time. Dad covered the phone, and I could hear the muffled sound of them arguing briefly before he returned to the call. "Your mother wants to know if there's any way to salvage this situation," he said, his voice more measured now. 26 people are arriving tomorrow with nowhere to stay." "There is one option," I said, "but it would require the family to reconsider its position on my inclusion." "You're blackmailing us with hotel rooms?" Dad asked, sounding both shocked and somewhat impressed. "I'm negotiating," I corrected. "Something you taught me to do very well. I can arrange alternative accommodations at the Monarch Lodge. It's 20 minutes from the Westbrook, equally luxurious and technically fully booked, but the owner owes me a favor. And in exchange?" "A genuine invitation," I said. "Not just to the reunion, but to be treated as an equal member of this family. No more dismissive comments about my career choices. No more being the butt of family jokes. And a public acknowledgement from Victoria that she was wrong to exclude me." "Victoria won't like that last part," Dad said, but I could tell from his tone that he was already calculating the family's limited options. "Those are my terms," I replied. "Take them or leave them." Dad covered the phone again, and I heard more muffled conversation. A moment later, Victoria's voice came through, tight with barely controlled anger. "You've made your point, Sophia," she said. "Congratulations on your little power play. We'll include you in the reunion." "That's not enough," I said. "I want a public apology on the same Instagram account where you've been flaunting this reunion while deliberately excluding me." "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious," I interrupted. "You publicly excluded and humiliated me. The apology should match the offense." "Fine," she snapped. "I'll post something. Now will you fix the hotel situation?" "I'll make the arrangements as soon as I see the post," I promised. "And Victoria? Make it sincere. I'll know if it isn't." After we hung up, I sat in my apartment feeling a strange mix of vindication and sadness. I hadn't planned to cancel their reservation when I first received Victoria's email. That decision had come only after seeing her Instagram post, the flagrant celebration of family togetherness, while deliberately excluding a family member. My phone pinged with an Instagram notification. Victoria had posted a new photo, not of the private jet or designer luggage, but an old family picture from when we were teenagers. All 4 Chen siblings arm in arm at our parents' 20th anniversary party. Family reflection time, the caption read. I owe a major apology to my youngest sister, Sophia. In my eagerness to plan the perfect family reunion, I made the terrible mistake of excluding the person whose genuine heart and brilliance have always been the true definition of Chen family excellence. I've learned today that success comes in many forms, and Sophia's path, though different from what we expected, deserves not just acceptance but celebration. Grateful that she's giving us another chance to be the family she deserves. #family reunion redefined, #sorry not perfect. It wasn't Shakespeare, but coming from Victoria, who had once returned a designer handbag because the stitching was off by a millimeter, it was practically a love sonnet. More importantly, it was public. The carefully cultivated Chen family image now included an acknowledgement of imperfection and an apology. I immediately called Sebastian at the Monarch Lodge. I need the Highland Estate and surrounding suites for the weekend, I said. For the Chen family. Already reserved them when you called about the Westbrook cancellation, Sebastian replied. I had a feeling reconciliation might be on the table. You know me too well, I laughed. Actually, I just know the hotel business, he countered. No one cancels a $45,000 reservation without leaving the door open for negotiation. After finalizing the details, I texted Victoria the confirmation information, adding, I'll be arriving tomorrow afternoon. Looking forward to seeing everyone. Her response came immediately. The private jet is leaving at 10 a.m. from SFO if you want to join. Otherwise, a car will be waiting at the Aspen airport for your commercial flight. It wasn't quite a warm welcome, but it was progress, Rachel called moments later. OMG, Victoria's post. What did you do? I reminded my family about the power of connections, I said, and that respect isn't optional in relationships, even family ones. But how did you get her to apologize publicly? Victoria never admits when she's wrong. Let's just say I created a situation where the cost of not apologizing was higher than the cost to her pride. The hotel reservation, Rachel realized. Somehow you were behind that. The Chen family is about to discover exactly what their, quote, glorified receptionist sister has been building for the past 3 years, I confirmed. As I packed for the weekend, my phone continued to buzz with messages from extended family members who had seen Victoria's post and were curious about the drama unfolding behind the scenes. I ignored most of them, focusing instead on finalizing details for the week ahead. Forbes had requested additional information for their 30 under 30 inches feature, and 2 major hotel chains were in the final stages of negotiation for implementing Reservolite's newest artificial intelligence module. After 3 years of working in relative obscurity, my company was about to become very visible in both the tech and hospitality worlds. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. My family was about to witness firsthand what I had built while they were busy dismissing my career choices. My phone rang again. Alexander this time. I answered with some hesitation. I just got off the phone with Sebastian Reynolds, he said without preamble. Do you know who that is? Global Operations Director for Pinnacle Luxury Hotels, I replied. Why? He called to personally confirm our reservation at the Monarch Lodge, Alexander said slowly. And he mentioned that he was doing so as a professional courtesy to the founder of Reservolite, whose software has, and I'm quoting here, revolutionized luxury hospitality management. That was nice of him, I said neutrally. He said the founder's name is Sophia Chen, Alexander continued. My sister's name is Sophia Chen. What a coincidence, I replied, unable to keep a hint of satisfaction from my voice. This isn't just some hotel job, is it? He asked. Victoria said you were checking people in at the front desk. How big is Reservolite? He finally asked, his investment banker instincts clearly kicking in. We're in the final stages of our Series C funding round, I said. The valuation is confidential, but it's significant enough that your firm tried to get in on it last quarter. That was your company? Alexander's voice had risen an octave. The hospitality tech unicorn that Blackridge Capital has been trying to invest in for months? The very same, I confirmed. Your colleagues have been quite persistent, though we're leaning toward remaining independent for now. Another silence, longer this time. I've been an absolute ass, haven't I? He finally said. Yes, I agreed. You all have. Does Mom know? Does Dad? They will, I said. By the end of this weekend, everyone will. The next morning, my alarm went off at 6 a.m. I had a choice to make. Take Victoria's olive branch and join the family on their private jet, or maintain some distance and fly commercial to Colorado. After careful consideration, I decided on the former. If reconciliation was the goal, I needed to fully commit. I texted Victoria, "I'll take that seat on the jet. See you at the terminal at 9:30. Her response came almost immediately. "Car will pick you up at 8:45. Don't be late." Some things never changed. Even in the midst of family drama and hotel reservation chaos, Victoria still managed to control every detail. But this time, I found it more amusing than irritating. When the sleek black SUV pulled up outside my apartment building, I was ready with a single weekend bag. The driver looked surprised at my minimal luggage, clearly accustomed to the mountains of designer suitcases that typically accompanied the Chen family on their travels. "Just this one bag, Miss Chen?" he asked, taking it from me. "That's all I need," I confirmed. The drive to the private terminal was quiet, giving me time to mentally prepare for what would inevitably be an uncomfortable reunion. I hadn't seen most of my family in over 6 months, and our last gathering had ended with pointed comments about my disappointing life choices. When we arrived at the terminal, I spotted Victoria immediately. She stood apart from the others, impeccably dressed in a cream cashmere travel set that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, tapping furiously on her phone. She looked up as I approached, her expression unreadable. "Sophia," she said with a curt nod. "You're on time. That's something." "Good morning to you too, Victoria," I replied, refusing to be baited into defensiveness. She studied me for a moment, taking in my simple jeans, sweater, and leather jacket. Practical travel clothes that would have seemed perfectly normal on anyone else, but were woefully understated by Chen family standards. "You couldn't dress up a little?" she asked. "We're meeting Uncle Philip and Aunt Margaret at the lodge. You know how they are about appearances." "I'm dressed appropriately for a family weekend in the mountains," I said evenly. "And I've long since stopped trying to impress Uncle Philip." Victoria sighed dramatically but didn't push further. "Everyone's already on board. Mom and Dad want to speak with you before we take off." My stomach tightened. "About?" "What do you think?" she retorted. "You canceled a $45,000 reservation and then strong-armed us into a public apology. Did you expect them to just let that go?" "I expected to be treated like a member of this family," I said. "Not excluded and then only contacted when you needed my help." Something flashed across Victoria's face, perhaps the first hint of genuine regret I'd seen. "Look," she said, lowering her voice. "What I did was wrong. The Instagram post wasn't just for show. I am sorry." The admission caught me off guard. Victoria never apologized unless absolutely cornered. "Thank you," I said simply. "But," she continued, her tone sharpening again, "you could have made your point without the nuclear option." Do you have any idea how many calls I had to make yesterday trying to find alternative accommodations? How many favors I had to call in? "Actually, I do," I replied. "Because I make those kinds of calls every day in my hotel job. The difference is, I succeeded where you failed." Victoria opened her mouth to retort, then closed it again. "We should board," she said finally. "They're waiting." Walking onto the private jet, I was greeted by the familiar faces of my extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and at the center of it all, my parents. Mom's expression was strained, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Dad sat beside her, his face impressively neutral for someone who had been forced to bend to his youngest daughter's demands less than 24 hours ago. "Sophia," Mom said, rising to kiss my cheek, "we're so glad you could join us after all." The carefully chosen words weren't lost on me. After all, as if my exclusion had been circumstantial rather than deliberate. "I wouldn't miss it," I replied with equal diplomacy. Though I understand there was some confusion about my invitation. Dad cleared his throat. Let's not rehash yesterday's misunderstanding. The important thing is that we're all together now, and we have excellent accommodations thanks to your connections. The slight pause before connections spoke volumes. He still didn't fully understand what I did, or how I had managed to salvage their ruined vacation plans. Yes, I agreed. The Monarch Lodge is actually superior to the Westbrook in many ways. Their chef trained under Alain Ducasse, and their wine cellar is one of the most impressive in North America. Alexander looked up from his phone with newfound interest. How do you know so much about it? Because my company's software manages their entire reservation and guest experience system, I explained. We've been working closely with their executive team for over a year. A murmur ran through the cabin as family members exchanged glances. This was clearly news to most of them. Your company? Aunt Margaret asked from across the aisle, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows rising in surprise. Victoria told us you were working at a hotel. I met Victoria's gaze steadily. I think there's been some misunderstanding about my career. I don't work at a hotel. I own Reservation Technologies, a software company that develops advanced management systems for luxury hotels worldwide. Another wave of murmurs, louder this time. Uncle Philip leaned forward, his businessman's interest piqued. Reservation? I've heard of that. My friend Jonathan at the Ritz mentioned implementing a new system last year, said it was revolutionary. That would be our platform, I confirmed. We've partnered with 16 of the top 20 luxury hotel chains globally. Dad was watching me with an expression I hadn't seen before, something between confusion and dawning respect. And this is what you've been doing since you left Alexander's firm? Building this company? Yes, I said. That's what I've been trying to tell you all for 3 years. But why didn't you make this clear? Mom asked. We thought you were just working some entry-level position. I tried to explain, I said, multiple times. But no one was interested in hearing about software development or artificial intelligence applications in the hospitality industry. Every time I started talking about my work, the conversation would shift to Victoria's fashion line, or Alexander's investment portfolio, or Olivia's political connections. An uncomfortable silence settled over the cabin as my words sank in. It was broken by the captain announcing our imminent departure. As the jet taxied toward the runway, Olivia, who had remained conspicuously quiet until now, finally spoke up. So just to be clear, you're not just working at these hotels, you're providing the technology that runs them, and you own this company? I'm the founder and CEO, I confirmed. We have 87 employees across offices in San Francisco, New York, and London. And the company is successful? She pressed. We're finalizing our Series C funding round next month, I said. The valuation is confidential, but yes, we're very successful. Alexander couldn't contain himself any longer. Her company is the hospitality tech unicorn that Blackridge Capital has been trying to invest in, he announced to the cabin. The one Patterson wouldn't stop talking about at the partners' dinner last quarter. This revelation sent a visible shockwave through the family. In the Chen family hierarchy, unicorn status trumped almost everything. A unicorn? Dad repeated, the term sounding strange in his mouth. Your company is valued at over $1 billion? As of the last funding round, I confirmed. The jet accelerated down the runway, pressing us back into our seats as we took off. The physical sensation mirrored the emotional shift happening in the cabin, a sudden, dramatic change in elevation. Mom reached across the aisle to take my hand, her eyes wide. Why didn't you tell us? I did tell you, I said gently. You just weren't listening. The truth of that statement hung in the air as we climbed to cruising altitude. No one seemed to know quite what to say next. Finally, my cousin Ethan broke the tension. So, can you get us upgrades at the Four Seasons? He asked with a grin. Because I've got an anniversary coming up, and points aren't cutting it. The cabin erupted in laughter, grateful for the release of tension. I smiled despite myself. I might be able to arrange something. As conversations resumed around us, Victoria leaned over from the seat beside me, her voice low. Why didn't you just tell me directly? About the company, about your success. Why let us think you were struggling all this time? I considered her question carefully. At first, I tried, but after being dismissed repeatedly, I decided to focus on building something substantial before trying again. And then, as the company grew, I realized something important. I didn't need your approval anymore. I was proud of what I was creating, whether you understood it or not. But we're family, she insisted. We should know these things about each other. Family works both ways, I replied. It's not just about me telling you things. It's about you being interested enough to listen. Victoria fell silent, absorbing this. After a moment, she said, The Monarch Lodge reservation. How did you arrange it so quickly? I called them myself yesterday, and they said they were completely booked. They are completely booked, I confirmed. But the owner is an early investor in Reserve Elite. When I explained the situation, he made arrangements to accommodate us. The Highland estate was reserved for the owner's personal use this weekend, but he's letting us have it instead. Victoria's eyes widened. The Highland estate? That's their most exclusive accommodation. It's impossible to book. Nothing's impossible with the right connections, I said, something our family has always understood, just not in the ways you expected from me. The rest of the flight passed with a noticeably different energy. Family members who had barely acknowledged me at previous gatherings suddenly found reasons to stop by my seat, asking questions about my company, expressing amazement at my hidden success. It was flattering but also somewhat irritating. Their interest felt conditional, triggered only by the revelation of financial achievement rather than genuine curiosity about my life. When we landed in Aspen, there was a fleet of luxury SUVs waiting to transport us to the Monarch Lodge. As we approached the vehicles, I noticed my family automatically arranging themselves according to their usual hierarchy. Parents in the lead car, followed by Victoria, Alexander, and Olivia with their spouses, while cousins and more distant relatives took the remaining vehicles. Sophia, Mom called, surprising me. You'll ride with us, of course. This was new. In previous family outings, I'd been relegated to whatever vehicle had space, usually with the younger cousins or unmarried relatives. Now, suddenly, I merited a place in the flagship car. Actually, I said, making a split-second decision, I need to arrive a bit earlier to check on some details with the management team. I'll take the first vehicle if that's all right. My parents exchanged glances, clearly thrown by this departure from their carefully orchestrated family procession. Of course, Dad finally said. We'll see you at the lodge. As I settled into the lead SUV, I texted Sebastian, arriving in 30 minutes. Everything ready? His response was immediate. All set. Staff briefed. Your suite has been prepared according to specifications. The drive to the Monarch Lodge wound through spectacular mountain scenery, the aspens beginning to show hints of their famous golden autumn colors. Under different circumstances, I might have found it peaceful, even meditative, but my mind was racing, processing the dramatic shift in my family's perception and preparing for what would inevitably be a weekend of revelations and renegotiated relationships. When we pulled up to the Monarch Lodge, Sebastian was waiting at the entrance, his tall figure impeccable in a tailored suit, despite the mountain setting. As I stepped from the vehicle, he greeted me with a warm smile and professional handshake. Exactly the right balance of personal connection and public decorum. Miss Chen, welcome to the Monarch Lodge, he said, loud enough for the drivers unloading luggage to hear. Everything has been arranged according to your specifications. The Highland estate is ready for your family's arrival. Thank you, Sebastian, I replied, matching his professional tone. I appreciate you accommodating us on such short notice. He lowered his voice as we walked toward the entrance. Your family doesn't know about your connection to the lodge ownership? They're just figuring out what I actually do, I explained. It's been enlightening for everyone. Sebastian nodded, understanding immediately. In that case, we've prepared something special. The management team would like to greet you properly when everyone arrives. "That's not necessary," I began, but Sebastian cut me off with a gentle shake of his head. "After what you've done for this property, it's the least we can do. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "I think your family might benefit from seeing you in your professional element." Before I could argue further, the remaining SUVs pulled up, disgorging my family in a flurry of designer luggage and expensive outerwear. Mom and Dad approached first, their expressions a mix of awe and confusion as they took in the magnificent lodge with its soaring timber beams and panoramic mountain views. "This is impressive," Dad acknowledged, looking around. "More exclusive than the Westbrooks, certainly." The Monarch is consistently rated among the top 5 mountain resorts in North America, I explained. They're particularly known for their personalized service and attention to detail. As if on cue, the general manager approached, flanked by several staff members in the lodge's distinctive uniform. "Miss Chen," he said warmly, extending his hand. "What an honor to have you staying with us. Your family is in for a truly exceptional experience." My parents exchanged puzzled glances at this enthusiastic greeting. Before they could question it, the manager continued. "The staff has been briefed on your family's preferences, as per your assistant's instructions, and we've arranged a special welcome reception in the Highland Estates Great Room whenever you're ready." "My assistant," Mom repeated, looking at me in confusion. "Sandra contacted the lodge yesterday with detailed preferences for each family member," I explained. "Dietary restrictions, room temperature preferences, preferred amenities, all the details that make a stay more comfortable." Victoria, who had joined us during this exchange, raised an eyebrow. "You have an assistant who knows our personal preferences." "I have an executive assistant who's very thorough," I confirmed. "Part of building a successful company is surrounding yourself with exceptional people." The general manager beamed at our group. "If you'll follow me, I'll show you to the Highland Estate. It's our crown jewel. 8,000 square feet of luxury with private chef service, dedicated staff, and the best views on the property." As we followed him through the lodge's main building and along a private path to the secluded estate house, I could feel my family's curiosity and confusion mounting. This wasn't just a nice hotel room. This was the kind of accommodation usually reserved for visiting dignitaries or celebrities, the type of exclusive experience that even the status-conscious Chen family rarely accessed. The Highland Estate revealed itself as we rounded a bend in the path. A stunning timber and glass structure nestled against the mountainside, its multiple levels cascading down the slope to maximize the breathtaking views. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the afternoon sunlight, and a staff lineup waited at the entrance to greet us. "My God," Alexander muttered beside me. "This isn't a suite, it's a compound." The Highland Estate includes the main residence with 6-bedroom suites, plus 2 adjacent guest houses with 4 additional suites, I explained. "More than enough room for everyone to have privacy." "How did you manage this?" Olivia asked, her voice hushed with amazement. "Victoria said she called in every favor she had yesterday and couldn't find anything remotely comparable to the Westbrook." Before I could answer, the estate's head butler stepped forward. "Ms. Chen, welcome back to the Monarch. We've prepared everything according to your usual preferences, and the development team is on standby for your system review tomorrow morning as requested." "Welcome back," Dad repeated, looking at me sharply. "You've stayed here before?" "Several times," I confirmed. "We use the Monarch as a test site for new Reserve Elite features before rolling them out globally. I typically spend a week here each quarter working directly with their management team." As the butler led us into the great room, a spectacular space with soaring 30-foot ceilings, a massive stone fireplace, and walls of glass showcasing the mountain panorama, my family fell uncharacteristically silent. This was so far beyond what they had expected that they seemed unable to process it fully. The butler directed staff to show each family member to their assigned suite, leaving my parents, siblings, and me in the great room with Sebastian and the general manager. "I've taken the liberty of arranging a private welcome dinner this evening," Sebastian said. "Chef Marcel has prepared a special menu highlighting local ingredients, paired with selections from our cellar that I believe will impress even Mr. Alexander Chen's discerning palate." Alexander, known for his wine collection, looked surprised at being singled out. You know about my wine preferences? Of course, sir, Sebastian replied smoothly. Ms. Chen's team provided detailed profiles for each family member to ensure your stay would be personalized to your tastes. We know about your recent interest in small production burgundies, Mrs. Victoria Chen's preference for Himalayan salt in her mineral water, and Ms. Olivia Chen's allergy to shellfish. My siblings exchanged startled glances at this level of detail. Mom looked at me with new eyes. You arranged all of this? My team did, I corrected. This is what Reservation does. Creates seamless, personalized experiences for luxury properties and their guests. The Monarch is one of our flagship implementations. Your software does this? Dad asked, gesturing around at the estate and the attentive staff. The software facilitates it, I explained. It tracks guest preferences, predicts needs based on past behavior, coordinates service delivery, and enables the kind of personalization that makes a great hotel stay exceptional. But ultimately, it's the human touch that matters, which is why the Monarch is so special. They understand that technology should enhance service, not replace it. The general manager nodded enthusiastically. Ms. Chen's platform has transformed our business. We've seen a 43% increase in guest satisfaction scores and a 28% rise in repeat bookings since implementing Reservation. It's been revolutionary. Revolutionary, Dad repeated, the word hanging in the air between us. I recognized the look on his face, the same expression he wore when Victoria landed her first major fashion client, or when Alexander closed a particularly impressive deal. It was respect, tinged with surprise and perhaps a hint of regret at having underestimated me for so long. I'll leave you to settle in, Sebastian said diplomatically. Dinner will be served at 7 in the private dining room. Please let the staff know if you need anything at all. As Sebastian and the general manager departed, an awkward silence fell over our family group. For perhaps the first time in Chen family history, no one seemed to know quite what to say. Finally, Alexander broke the silence. So, little sister, he said, a new note of respect in his voice. It seems we have a lot to catch up on. I excused myself to freshen up before dinner, needing a moment alone to process the rapidly shifting dynamics of my family relationships. My suite was located in the west wing of the main estate house, a stunning space with panoramic mountain views, a fireplace large enough to stand in, and furnishings that struck the perfect balance between luxury and comfort. As I stood by the window, watching the late afternoon light paint the mountains gold, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from Forbes confirming final details for next week's 30 Under 30 Inches feature. Attached was a preview of the article, with a note from the editor. Sophia, thought you might want to see this before it goes live. The team is excited about featuring Reservation as our cover technology story. Your journey from rejected startup to industry transformer is exactly what this year's list is all about. I skimmed the article, which detailed how I had built Reservation from a concept sketched on napkins in a San Francisco coffee shop to the system now powering the guest experience at over 200 luxury properties worldwide. The piece highlighted our innovative AI-driven personalization engine and quoted several industry leaders calling the platform revolutionary and the future of hospitality. What the article didn't mention, because I hadn't shared it with the reporter, was how my family had dismissed my vision from the beginning. How Victoria had laughed when I turned down a position at Alexander's firm to play with hotel software. How my parents had spent years introducing me at family gatherings as our daughter who works in hotels, their tone suggesting it was a temporary phase before I came to my senses. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Come in, I called, expecting one of the staff members. Instead, my mother entered, looking uncharacteristically hesitant. In her tailored travel outfit and perfectly styled hair, she appeared as polished as ever, but something in her expression had changed. Your room is lovely, she said, glancing around, though I suspect you're used to accommodations like this now. I smiled. I still live in the same apartment I've had for 3 years, Mom. These stays are for work, not luxury. She sat on the edge of the sofa, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her pants. Your father and I have been talking. About you, about Reservation, about everything. The directness of her admission surprised me. Mom wasn't known for acknowledging mistakes. We didn't listen, she continued. When you tried to tell us about your work, we heard what we expected to hear, not what you were actually saying. We translated "I'm developing hotel software" into "I'm taking a step down in my career," because it didn't fit our definition of success. It hurt, I admitted. Having my achievements dismissed, being treated like the family disappointment when I was actually building something meaningful. Mom nodded, her eyes reflecting genuine regret. I kept waiting for you to come back to the path we'd envisioned: business school, corporate leadership, the trajectory your siblings followed. I couldn't see that you were carving an entirely new path, one we hadn't imagined. She reached for my hand, a gesture of affection rare in our family's typically reserved interactions. The thing is, Sophia, parents don't always know what's best. We think we do. God knows we're convinced of it when you're growing up. But sometimes our children see possibilities we can't envision. Is that what Dad thinks too? I asked, finding it hard to imagine my father, with his rigid views on career success, coming to such a realization. Mom laughed softly. Your father is processing. Sebastian took him on a tour of the property and explained more about Reservation's impact on their operations. I believe the phrase revolutionary system was used several times. You know how your father responds to business success. I did know. In the Chen family, achievement had always been the ultimate currency. If Reservation was being recognized as revolutionary, that would certainly shift my father's perspective, regardless of whether he understood the technology itself. The general manager mentioned you're on the cover of Forbes next week, Mom continued. Why didn't you tell us? I shrugged. Would you have believed me? Or would you have assumed it was some minor mention in a technology supplement that I was exaggerating? The question hung between us, uncomfortable but honest. After a moment, Mom sighed. I probably would have asked if it was the actual Forbes or some industry newsletter using their logo. And that's exactly the problem. She stood and walked to the window, taking in the spectacular view. You know, when your father and I immigrated, we had such clear ideas about success. Education, prestigious careers, financial security. These were concrete goals we could understand and measure. But you've shown us that success can look completely different than what we imagined. I'm still measuring success, I pointed out, just with different metrics: user satisfaction, system reliability, the quality of experiences we help create. These matter more to me than a corner office or a prestigious title. Mom turned from the window, studying me with new eyes. You really love what you've built, don't you? It's not just about proving us wrong or making money. I never wanted to prove anyone wrong, I said honestly. I just wanted to create something valuable, something that could transform an industry I care about. The fact that it's become financially successful is wonderful, but it's not why I started. A soft chime sounded throughout the suite, the elegant dinner notification system I'd helped design for the monarch. That's the first dinner call, I explained. We have 30 minutes before service begins. Mom nodded, moving toward the door. She paused with her hand on the handle. Sophia, I want you to know, regardless of Forbes or valuations or anything else, I'm proud of you. Not just for what you've built, but for having the courage to follow your own path, even when we didn't understand it. The words I'd waited years to hear. They came so simply now, wrapped in the golden light of a mountain sunset and the shifting ground of family revelations. Thank you, I said, feeling something tight inside me begin to unravel. That means more than you know. After she left, I changed for dinner, not into the formal attire that would have been expected at previous family gatherings, but into an elegant yet comfortable outfit that reflected who I truly was. The days of dressing to meet Chen family expectations were behind me. When I entered the private dining room 30 minutes later, I found my family already gathered. They were mingling with cocktails near the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the mountains, now silhouetted against the sunset. The conversation paused as I entered, all eyes turning toward me with a new awareness that was both gratifying and slightly uncomfortable. Victoria approached first, offering me a glass of champagne. The staff insisted on Ruin Arch, she said. Apparently it's your favorite. For celebrations, I confirmed, accepting the glass. Though I'm perfectly happy with anything sparkling. Well, this is certainly a celebration, she replied. Our family reunion, salvaged against all odds. And, she added, lowering her voice, the overdue recognition of my little sister's extraordinary achievements. I studied her face, looking for signs of the resentment or competitive edge that had characterized so many of our interactions. Instead, I found what appeared to be genuine admiration, perhaps tinged with regret. You know, Victoria continued, I always thought I was helping you by pushing you toward conventional success, the kind of career path that worked for me. It never occurred to me that you might be building something more innovative, more impactful than anything I could imagine. Different paths work for different people, I said. Your fashion empire is impressive in its own right. She smiled ruefully. It's successful, yes. But revolutionary? Transformative? Those aren't words anyone uses to describe Victoria Chen designs. You've created something that's actually changing an industry. Before I could respond, the executive chef entered, accompanied by Sebastian. Ladies and gentlemen, Sebastian announced, Chef Marcel has prepared a special tasting menu for this evening, celebrating the best of Colorado's seasonal offerings with some international influences that we hope will please everyone. We moved to the elegantly set table, where place cards had been arranged with careful attention to family dynamics and conversational compatibility. I noticed with amusement that I had been placed at one end of the table, a position of honor usually reserved for my father. As we settled into our seats, Dad cleared his throat, lifting his glass. I'd like to propose a toast, he said, his voice carrying the authoritative tone that had defined my childhood. To family reunions, and to revelations that remind us to look beyond our assumptions. To revelations, the family echoed, glasses raised. The first course arrived, a delicate composition of local heirloom tomatoes, burrata, and micro-herbs that showcased Chef Marcel's attention to detail. As we began to eat, Alexander leaned toward me from his seat to my right. So, little sister, he said, his investment banker's curiosity evident, tell us about this Forbes 30 Claim Under 30 Feet feature. Mom mentioned you're on the cover? I felt all eyes turn to me again. Yes, I confirmed. They're featuring Reservation in next week's technology issue. Apparently, our approach to AI-driven personalization has caught their attention. AI-driven personalization, Olivia repeated from across the table. That sounds impressive, but what does it actually mean in practice? It was the first time any of my siblings had asked for a genuine explanation of my work. I took a moment to consider how to translate complex technology concepts into terms they would understand. Think about your last luxury hotel stay, I began. How much information did the staff have about your preferences? Did they know you prefer extra pillows? Or that you always order a specific brand of sparkling water? Or that you're an early riser who appreciates coffee delivery at 6 a.m. sharp? Heads nodded around the table. Traditional hospitality relies on staff remembering these details or noting them in basic systems. But what happens when you visit a different property in the same chain? Or when the staff member who knows your preferences is off duty? The personalized experience often falls apart. I paused as servers arrived with the second course, a truffle-infused risotto that drew appreciative murmurs from around the table. Reservation changes that, I continued after they departed. Our system uses artificial intelligence to create a comprehensive preference profile for each guest, which follows them across properties and is accessible to all staff. But more importantly, it predicts needs based on patterns and context. If you order a specific tea each morning at one hotel, the system will ensure that tea is available when you check into another property in the network. If you typically request a late checkout when traveling for business but an early check-in for leisure trips, the system recognizes the pattern and proactively adjusts. That's why everyone here knows exactly what we like, Alexander realized. The Himalayan salt in Victoria's water, my wine preferences. It's all in your system. Exactly, I confirmed. But the real innovation is in how the AI continues learning and adapting. If you usually request a room away from elevators but one time mention you enjoyed a particular corner suite, the system notes that preference evolution and updates your profile. Victoria was watching me with newfound respect. And luxury hotels pay for this because it allows them to deliver consistent personalization at scale, which builds loyalty and increases revenue, Dad added, the businessman in him immediately grasping the value proposition. Very clever. The conversation continued through subsequent courses, with family members asking increasingly thoughtful questions about Reservolite's technology, business model, and future plans. For the first time in years, I found myself at the center of a family discussion, not as the disappointing youngest sibling, but as a successful entrepreneur with insights worth hearing. During dessert, a spectacular deconstructed s'mores creation that paid homage to mountain traditions while showcasing Chef Marcel's modernist techniques, Uncle Philip raised the question that had clearly been on several people's minds. "Sophia," he said, swirling the remains of an excellent port in his glass, "given Reservolite's success, have you considered acquisition offers? I imagine several of the major hotel chains or tech companies would be interested." The table fell silent, all eyes on me once again. "We've received several offers," I acknowledged, "but I'm not interested in selling. Reservolite is still evolving, still growing. There's so much more we can do with the technology, so many ways we can transform the guest experience. Why would I hand that opportunity to someone else?" "Because of the money," Cousin Ethan suggested pragmatically. "A successful tech acquisition could set you up for life." I smiled. "I'm already set up quite comfortably, Ethan. And I'm more interested in building something lasting than in cashing out early." "That's exactly what I told the Metrotech Group when they approached us about Victoria Chen Designs last year," Victoria interjected, surprising me. "Some things are worth more than a quick payday." It was the first time my sister had ever publicly aligned herself with one of my perspectives. The gesture wasn't lost on the rest of the family, who exchanged meaningful glances around the table. As dinner concluded and we moved to the great room for digestives by the fire, I found myself in a conversation with my father, who had been relatively quiet throughout the meal. "Your mother tells me you've been trying to explain Reservolite to us for years," he said, his tone difficult to read. "I tried," I confirmed. "But after a while it seemed easier to just let you all believe what you wanted to believe." Dad nodded slowly, contemplating the amber liquid in his glass. "When I came to this country, I had very specific ideas about success," he said. "Concrete achievements, recognized credentials, traditional career paths. These were the markers of the American dream as I understood it." "I know, Dad, and you achieved all of that and more." "I did," he agreed. "And I expected my children to follow similar paths, perhaps going further, higher, but along the same basic trajectory." He looked up at me, his expression unusually reflective. "It never occurred to me that the greatest success might come from charting an entirely new course, one I couldn't even envision." The admission clearly cost him something. My father had always been the family's unwavering compass, confident in his understanding of the path to success. "The technology you've developed," he continued, "Sebastian tells me it's being adopted by hospitality groups worldwide, that major investors are competing for the opportunity to fund your expansion, that you've turned down acquisition offers that would make even your brother's hedge fund deals look modest." "The business side is going well," I acknowledged. "But what matters more is that we're creating technology that genuinely improves experiences, for guests and for the staff who serve them." Dad studied me for a long moment. "You know, when you left Alexander's firm to work in hotels, as we understood it, I was convinced you were making a terrible mistake. Throwing away your education, your connections, your potential." "I remember," I said dryly. "You made your disappointment quite clear." He had the grace to look slightly abashed. "What I didn't understand then, what I'm only beginning to understand now, is that true innovation rarely follows established paths. The most transformative ideas often appear misguided to those operating within conventional thinking." It was perhaps the most profound thing I'd ever heard my father say, an acknowledgement not just of my success, but of the limitations of his own perspective. "I'm proud of you, Sophia," he said simply, "not because of Forbes or valuations or prestigious connections, though those are certainly impressive. I'm proud of your vision, your persistence, and your courage to follow your own path when everyone, including your family, advised against it. The words washed over me like a warm wave, healing places I hadn't realized were still wounded. For years, I had told myself that my parents' approval no longer mattered, that I had moved beyond needing their validation. Yet hearing these words from my father, I recognized the lingering child in me that had still been seeking exactly this recognition. "Thank you," I said softly. "That means a great deal to me." He nodded, then added with a hint of his usual pragmatism, "Of course, I still have questions about your long-term growth strategy and your approach to international markets. Perhaps we could discuss those tomorrow." I laughed, feeling the tension of years beginning to dissolve. "I'd like that," I said. "Reservation is actually preparing for a major expansion into Asian markets next quarter. Your perspective would be valuable." As the evening progressed, I found myself moving among family members who now viewed me through an entirely different lens. Cousins who had previously dismissed my career sought advice on tech investments. Aunts who had wondered when I would settle down now asked thoughtful questions about leading a growing company. Even Victoria, traditionally the family's alpha achiever, engaged me in a substantive conversation about managing rapid business growth while maintaining core values. Later, as the gathering began to disperse for the night, I stepped onto the estate's expansive terrace to enjoy a moment of solitude beneath the star-filled mountain sky. The cool air carried the scent of pine and wood smoke, a welcome contrast to the intense emotional currents of the evening. "Quite a night," Alexander said, joining me at the railing. "I don't think I've ever seen Dad admit he was wrong about anything, let alone something as fundamental as career guidance." I smiled at my brother's observation. "Growth mindset? Even Dad can evolve." Alexander chuckled, then fell silent for a moment, looking out at the dark silhouettes of mountains against the starlit sky. "You know," he said finally, "when you turned down the position at my firm, I thought you were making a huge mistake. I even told Dad it was your generation's ridiculous need to find meaning in work, instead of focusing on financial security." "I remember," I said. "You sent me articles about tech bubble bursts and startup failure rates for months afterward." He winced. "Not my finest moment as a supportive brother." "You thought you were protecting me," I acknowledged, "in your own somewhat overbearing way." "I was wrong," he said simply. "And I'm sorry. Not just for underestimating your vision, but for not taking the time to understand what you were building. For dismissing your path because it didn't look like mine." The apology was unexpected, especially from Alexander, who typically viewed the world through the calculated lens of financial advantage rather than emotional connection. "What changed your mind?" I asked. "Besides the obvious business success." He considered the question. "Watching you tonight," he said finally. "The way you talked about Reservation, not just the metrics or the valuation, but the vision, the impact, the transformation you're creating. You're building something meaningful, something with purpose. That's rarer than I'd like to admit in my world." The admission seemed to surprise him as much as it did me. Alexander had always been the family's pragmatist, focused on results rather than meaning. "Don't get me wrong," he added quickly, recovering his usual composure. "The unicorn valuation and Forbes cover don't hurt. But seeing you in your element tonight, I realized you found something I'm not sure I have. Work that truly matters to you, beyond the status or the compensation." It was perhaps the most vulnerable I'd ever seen my brother, a glimpse behind the polished hedge fund manager exterior to the human being underneath. "It's not too late to find that," I suggested. "Financial expertise can serve meaningful purposes too." Alexander nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps. Though first I'd need to figure out what meaningful actually means to me." He straightened, reverting to his more familiar self. "Anyway, just wanted to say I'm proud of you, little sister. And if you ever do decide to take Reservation public, I know some excellent investment bankers who would kill for that IPO." I laughed. Some things never change. As Alexander returned inside, I remained on the terrace, processing the seismic shifts in my family relationships that had occurred in just 24 hours. From excluded daughter to respected entrepreneur, from family disappointment to source of pride, the transformation was still settling into my reality. My phone buzzed with a text from Sandra, my assistant. "Final edits for Forbes piece approved. They've moved up online publication to coincide with the print release. Goes live Monday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern." Also, MIT Technology Review wants an exclusive for their next issue. Call to discuss when you're back? I texted back a quick confirmation, then slipped my phone into my pocket and took a final moment to absorb the perfect stillness of the mountain night. Tomorrow would bring more family dynamics to navigate, more revelations and realignments. But tonight, standing under a canopy of stars that seemed close enough to touch, I allowed myself to fully recognize what I had accomplished. Not just the business success that had finally earned my family's respect, but the deeper achievement of creating something valuable on my own terms, according to my own vision of what mattered. That, I realized, was the most meaningful victory of all. Morning arrived with the crystalline clarity unique to mountain elevations. Sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my suite at the Highland Estate. I woke early, a habit formed during years of startup life when dawn hours provided uninterrupted time to code and think before the demands of the day began. Slipping into running clothes, I headed out for a trail run, another ritual that had sustained me through the intense years of building Reservation. The path wound through aspen groves just beginning to turn golden, climbing steadily upward until I reached a vista point that offered breathtaking views of the valley below. I paused there, breathing in the crisp air and allowing myself to fully appreciate the moment. 3 years ago, I had been working 18-hour days in a tiny apartment, surviving on ramen and determination while writing the initial code for what would become Reservation's core engine. Back then, my family's dismissal of my work had been a sharp wound, but also, ironically, a kind of freedom. Without the weight of their expectations, I had been able to pursue my vision exactly as I saw it, unburdened by advice or interference. Now, as I stood on the mountainside watching the rising sun illuminate the valley, I wondered how our relationships would evolve with this new understanding. Would my parents' and siblings' newfound respect come with the pressure of expectations? Would they now feel entitled to opinions about my business decisions? Or could we find a balance? Mutual respect without entanglement. I completed my run and returned to the estate to find it still largely quiet. The Chen family typically slept late on vacation, a luxury I had long since abandoned in favor of productive mornings. In the great room, however, I was surprised to find my father already dressed and reading financial news on his tablet. "Early riser?" I asked, pausing on my way to my suite. He looked up with a slight smile. "Always have been. Your mother calls it a character flaw." This small revelation, that I shared my father's morning habit, felt surprisingly significant. How many other small connections had been obscured by our focus on differences? "I'm meeting with the Monarch's management team at 9 to review their implementation of our latest update," I explained. "But I'll join everyone for lunch." Dad nodded, then asked with genuine curiosity, "Would it be possible for me to observe this meeting? I'd like to understand more about what you've built." The request caught me off guard. My father had never shown interest in the operational details of my work before. "Of course," I said after a moment, "if you're really interested." "I am," he said simply. "Very much so." 2 hours later, my father and I sat in the Monarch Lodge's executive conference room with Sebastian, the general manager, and their head of technology operations. On the large display screen, I walked them through the new features in Reservation's latest release: enhanced predictive analytics for staffing optimization, integrated sustainability metrics to help properties reduce waste, and expanded language capabilities for international guests. The AI now analyzes historical data to predict staffing needs with 94% accuracy, I explained, showing the elegant visualizations our design team had created. This means you can optimize labor costs while ensuring peak service levels during high-demand periods. The lodge executives asked thoughtful questions about implementation and training requirements. Throughout, my father observed silently, his expression attentive and increasingly impressed as the technical discussion progressed. When the meeting concluded, Sebastian pulled me aside. "Your father asked me detailed questions about our ROI from Reservation before you arrived," he informed me quietly. "I hope you don't mind that I shared some numbers." "What kind of numbers?" I asked, curious. "Everything. The 32% reduction in operational costs, the 47% increase in guest satisfaction scores, the 28% growth in repeat bookings since implementation." He seemed particularly interested in how we measure the system's impact on staff efficiency and guest loyalty. I glanced across the room where my father was examining the property's command center, the hub where staff monitored all aspects of the guest experience through Reservation integrated dashboard. He's trying to understand, I realized aloud. Really understand, not just acknowledge the success. Sebastian nodded. He's a businessman trying to quantify his daughter's achievement in terms he can grasp. I think he's impressed, Sophia, and perhaps a bit humbled. As we left the operations center, Dad surprised me by asking even more questions about scaling challenges, security protocols, and our approach to international markets. His inquiries were pointed and perceptive, reflecting the sharp business mind that had built his own successful career. "You've thought of everything," he finally said as we walked back toward the Highland estate. "The system is extraordinarily comprehensive." "Not everything," I admitted. "We're constantly evolving, addressing new challenges, discovering blind spots. That's what makes it exciting. The work is never really done." He considered this. That's the mark of a true innovator, seeing the work as an ongoing evolution rather than a finished product. After a pause, he added, "I've spent my career analyzing business models, Sophia. What you've built isn't just successful, it's transformative. You've fundamentally reimagined how an entire industry approaches customer experience." Coming from my father, whose praise had always been measured and qualified, these words carried enormous weight. "Thank you," I said simply, knowing he would understand the depth of meaning behind my response. When we arrived back at the estate, we found the rest of the family gathered for brunch on the expansive terrace. The mood was noticeably different from previous family gatherings, lighter somehow, with fewer competitive undercurrents and status displays. Victoria, typically immaculate in designer attire even at breakfast, appeared in casual loungewear with her hair pulled back simply. Alexander had abandoned his usual morning checks of market updates and was engaged in a spirited card game with our younger cousins. Even Mom seemed more relaxed, her perpetual vigilance about appearances temporarily suspended in the mountain setting. "There she is," called Uncle Philip as I joined them. "The tech genius in our midst. Your father has been telling us about your system. Sounds extraordinary." I accepted a cup of coffee from one of the staff members, grateful for the normalcy of the simple action amid the shifting family dynamics. "It's a team effort," I said. "I have incredible engineers and designers who bring the vision to life. But it's your vision," Dad pointed out, surprising me again with his public acknowledgement. "The concept, the architecture, the core innovation, those came from you." Cousin Ethan looked up from his plate. "So what you're saying is we've been ignoring a literal tech visionary at family dinners for years? No wonder she canceled our reservation." The table erupted in laughter. Genuine, warm laughter that diffused any remaining tension. Even Victoria smiled, shaking her head ruefully. Quote, "In our defense," Alexander added, "she never mentioned the billion-dollar valuation or the Forbes cover. Those details might have gotten our attention sooner. I shouldn't have needed extraordinary success to earn your respect," I pointed out, keeping my tone light despite the serious undercurrent. "That's part of what went wrong." The statement hung in the air for a moment, its truth undeniable. It was Mom who finally responded, her voice unusually reflective. "You're absolutely right, Sophia," she said. "And that's a lesson this family needed to learn." She looked around the table, making eye contact with each person. "We've been measuring success by very narrow metrics: prestige, wealth, recognition. But there are many forms of achievement, many definitions of a life well lived. We would all do well to remember that." It was perhaps the most honest conversation our family had ever had about the values that had shaped our relationships and interactions. The acknowledgement seemed to release something in the atmosphere, allowing a more authentic connection to emerge. After brunch, as family members dispersed to enjoy various activities, hiking, spa treatments, mountain biking, Victoria approached me with an unexpected request. "Would you show me," she asked, "your software, how it works, what it actually does? I've been dismissing it for years without ever really understanding it." The request represented a significant shift. Victoria, who had always positioned herself as the family's ultimate achiever, was now acknowledging her limited understanding and asking to learn. I'd love to, I said, genuinely pleased by her interest. The staff has set up a demonstration space in the lodge's business center. We can go now if you'd like. As we walked to the main building, Victoria confessed, I feel like I've been operating with blinders on, Sophia. I was so convinced that success had to look like what I've achieved, visibility, status, recognition, that I couldn't see the value in a different path. We all have our blind spots, I acknowledged. I probably haven't been as appreciative of your achievements as I could have been either. She smiled slightly. My achievements are pretty straightforward. I design clothes that wealthy women want to wear and create a luxury brand identity that makes people feel special. It's successful, but it's hardly revolutionary. Don't undervalue what you've built, I countered. Creating something that makes people feel confident and beautiful has real impact, different from my work, but not less significant. Victoria looked surprised at my defense of her career. That's actually a lovely way to think about it. Thank you. In the business center, I walked Victoria through a demonstration of Reservolite's core functions, showing how the system created seamless, personalized experiences by anticipating needs and coordinating service delivery. As I explained the technology in accessible terms, I was struck by how engaged she was, asking thoughtful questions, making connections to her own customer experience challenges, displaying genuine curiosity. It's extraordinary, she said finally. Not just the technology but the vision behind it. This idea that technology should enhance human connection rather than replace it. You've created something that makes both guests and staff more satisfied, more seen. That was always the goal, I confirmed. Hospitality is fundamentally about human connection. The technology should support that, not interfere with it. Victoria was quiet for a moment, contemplating something. I've been thinking about our family dynamic, she said finally. How we've all been performing for each other for years, showcasing achievements, competing for attention and approval. It's exhausting, isn't it? Extremely, I agreed, surprised by her insight. What if we stopped? She suggested. What if we just accepted each other as we are? Celebrated different forms of success without ranking them? Supported each other's distinct paths? The proposition was radical in the context of our family's historical dynamics. Do you think that's possible for us? I asked. I don't know, she admitted. Old habits die hard. But this weekend has been eye-opening. For all of us, I think. Maybe it's a starting point. As we headed back to the estate, we passed the Monarch's front desk where a staff member was checking in new arrivals. I noticed Victoria observing how the receptionist used Reservolite's interface to access guest preferences and history, creating an immediately personalized welcome. The guest never had to say a word about their room preferences or dining restrictions, Victoria noted. The system already knew, and the staff member could focus on making them feel welcome rather than collecting information. Exactly, I confirmed. That's the essence of what we're trying to achieve, removing friction so human connections can take center stage. Victoria nodded thoughtfully. I can see applications for this approach in retail too. Technology that enhances the personal shopping experience rather than replacing it. She glanced at me. Would you be open to discussing potential collaborations between Reservolite and Victoria Chen Designs? I have some ideas about personalized luxury retail experiences that might benefit from your approach. The suggestion represented a seismic shift in our relationship, from dismissive older sister to potential business collaborator. I'd be very interested in exploring that, I said sincerely. Back at the Highland estate, I found a message waiting from Sandra, my assistant. MIT Technology Review interview confirmed for Wednesday. Also, CNBC wants you for a segment on transformative hospitality tech next week. And Sebastian called, said to tell you the demonstration for your family was revelatory for them, whatever that means. I smiled at the last part. The weekend was proving to be revelatory indeed, in ways I hadn't anticipated when I'd made that impulsive call to cancel the Westbrook reservation. That evening, the family gathered for a spectacular outdoor dinner on the estate's main terrace. Chef Marcel had created a farm-to-table feast featuring local ingredients, and the staff had arranged the setting with understated elegance. Soft lighting from suspended lanterns, mountain views enhanced by the setting sun, a gentle background of acoustic music. As we settled around the long table, I noticed something unusual about the seating arrangement. Rather than the traditional hierarchy that had governed Chen family gatherings for years, parents at the heads of the table, siblings arranged by age and achievement, the places seemed randomly mixed, with generations and family branches interspersed. I asked them to arrange it this way, Mom explained when she noticed my questioning look. I thought it might be nice to break our usual patterns, create opportunities for different conversations. It was a small gesture but significant, an acknowledgement that the old ways weren't serving us well, that change was possible even in something as seemingly fixed as family dynamics. Throughout dinner, I found myself engaged in conversations I'd never had at previous family gatherings. Uncle Philip shared stories about his early business struggles that he'd never mentioned before. Cousin Ethan revealed his passion for documentary filmmaking, a creative pursuit he'd kept hidden from the achievement-focused family. Even Alexander opened up about his growing disillusionment with the hedge fund world and his interest in impact investing. I've been thinking about what you said last night, he told me quietly as dessert was being served, about finding meaning in work beyond compensation and status. It's been on my mind all day. And? I prompted. And I'm beginning to wonder if I've been measuring success by the wrong metrics, he admitted. The numbers are impressive. The lifestyle is enviable. But some days I question what it's all for. What difference am I actually making? It was a vulnerability I'd never witnessed in my driven, pragmatic brother. It's never too late to realign, I suggested. To find work that connects to your values. He nodded thoughtfully. Watching you talk about Reserve Elite, the passion, the purpose, the pride in creating something that genuinely improves experiences, it highlighted what's missing in my own career. I make money. I manage wealth. But am I building anything meaningful? Only you can answer that, I said gently. But I'd be happy to talk through it more if you want. Sometimes an outside perspective helps. Alexander smiled wryly. The irony isn't lost on me, seeking career guidance from my unsuccessful younger sister. Life takes unexpected turns, doesn't it? As the evening progressed, Dad stood to offer a toast. In his hand was an aged whiskey selected from the monarch's impressive cellar, a rare single malt normally reserved for the property's most distinguished guests. Sebastian insisted I try this, he explained. Said it was your favorite, Sophia, for special occasions. I nodded, touched by the gesture. It's exceptional. Dad raised his glass, his expression more open than I could remember seeing it. To family, he began, in all its complicated glory. To lessons learned about success and achievement and what truly matters. And to my youngest daughter, Sophia, who had the courage to forge her own path when everyone, especially her father, advised otherwise. He paused, his voice taking on an emotional quality rarely displayed in our family's typically reserved interactions. You've taught us all something important this weekend, that true innovation requires the courage to reject conventional wisdom, to see possibilities others can't envision. Your mother and I came to this country with very specific ideas about success, about the paths our children should follow. We never imagined that the greatest achievement would come from forging an entirely new path. The table had fallen silent, everyone focused on my father's uncharacteristically heartfelt words. I'm proud of all my children, he continued, looking around at Victoria, Alexander, and me. Each of you has built something substantial in your own way. But I've realized that in our focus on traditional markers of success, we nearly missed recognizing a true visionary in our midst. He raised his glass higher. To Sophia, who reminds us that the most meaningful achievements often begin with the courage to follow your own vision, even when those closest to you don't yet understand it. To Sophia, the family echoed, glasses raised. As the toast concluded, I found myself unexpectedly emotional. For years, I had told myself that my family's approval no longer mattered, that I had moved beyond needing their validation. Yet their acknowledgement, now freely given, filled a space inside me I hadn't realized was still empty. Later, As the evening wound down and family members began to drift off to their suites, Mom joined me by the outdoor fireplace where I was enjoying the mountain night air. "I owe you an apology," she said, settling into the adjacent chair. "A real one, beyond what we discussed yesterday." "You already apologized, Mom." "It's okay." She shook her head. "No, this is different. I've been thinking about something specific. Those Sunday dinners when you would try to tell us about your work, about the system you were developing. I remember changing the subject, asking when you were going to get a real job or meet someone or buy a proper car. The memories were still sharp. The disappointment of trying to share my excitement about technological breakthroughs, only to have the conversation redirected to Victoria's latest fashion show or Alexander's newest investment success. It wasn't that we didn't care," Mom continued. "It was that we didn't understand, and rather than admit our ignorance, we retreated to topics where we felt comfortable. That was wrong, and I'm truly sorry." Her candor surprised me. "Thank you," I said simply. "I've learned something important from all this," she added. "About listening with genuine curiosity, especially when someone is sharing something unfamiliar. About suspending judgment long enough to truly understand." She smiled ruefully. "These aren't easy lessons at my age, but necessary ones." "We're all still learning," I offered. "I could have been more persistent, found better ways to help you understand what I was building." Mom shook her head. "That wasn't your responsibility. We should have made the effort." She reached over to squeeze my hand. "But what matters now is moving forward. This weekend has been a reset for our family, a chance to see each other more clearly, to rebuild relationships based on genuine understanding rather than expectations and assumptions." As she spoke, I realized that the canceled reservation, my impulsive act of rebellion, had created something valuable beyond my individual vindication. It had forced a necessary disruption in our family's dysfunctional patterns, creating space for new, more authentic connections to emerge. "I have a question," Mom said, interrupting my thoughts. "This Forbes cover next week. Would you be comfortable if we hosted a small celebration? Nothing extravagant, just family and a few close friends to acknowledge your achievement?" The offer was touching, a public acknowledgement of my success from the family that had long overlooked it. "That would be lovely," I said. "Thank you." She smiled, clearly pleased. "Victoria's already brainstorming." She mentioned something about tech-themed cocktails and transforming the garden into an, quote, innovation celebration. "You might want to provide some input before she gets carried away." I laughed, imagining my sister's enthusiastic approach to event planning applied to a tech industry achievement. "I'll talk to her tomorrow." As Mom left for her suite, I remained by the fire, reflecting on the weekend's unexpected evolution. What had begun as an act of righteous indignation, canceling the family's reservation to make a point about my exclusion, had transformed into something far more meaningful. An opportunity for genuine recognition, for mutual understanding, for the reshaping of family dynamics that had been dysfunctional for years. My phone buzzed with a notification from Sandra. "Forbes just sent a preview link for Monday's cover. Thought you'd want to see it immediately." I opened the link to find the article ready for publication. "The Hospitality Revolution: How Sophia Chen's Reservolite is Transforming the Guest Experience." The cover image showed me standing in the command center of one of our flagship hotel implementations, surrounded by the elegant visualization dashboards that displayed our AI systems at work. The headline read, "The Invisible Innovation: Building Technology that Enhances Human Connection." It was perfect, capturing exactly what I had been trying to achieve with Reservolite from the beginning. Not technology for its own sake, but tools that elevated human experiences, that made meaningful connections more possible. I forwarded the link to my parents and siblings with a simple message. "Thought you might like a preview. Thank you for your support this weekend. It means more than you know." The responses came almost immediately. From Dad: "Extraordinary. Truly groundbreaking work, Sophia. Looking forward to learning more about your international expansion plans tomorrow." From Mom: "So proud of you, my brilliant daughter. The celebration planning begins tomorrow." From Victoria: "This is major. Already thinking about outfits for your Forbes party. Also serious about that retail collaboration idea. Let's talk Monday. From Alexander. Cover looks amazing. The hedge fund world is buzzing about Reservation, by the way. Just heard your name mentioned in our partners meeting last week. Surreal to realize they were talking about my, quote, little sister. As I read their messages, I felt a profound sense of closure. The painful chapter of family misunderstanding was ending. A new one of mutual respect and genuine connection was beginning. The journey hadn't been easy, but the destination, this moment of alignment between my internal sense of achievement and external recognition, felt deeply satisfying. Looking up at the star-filled mountain sky, I thought about the sequence of events that had led to this transformation. One moment of righteous determination, the decision to cancel that $45,000 reservation, had catalyzed a complete reset of family dynamics that had seemed immutable. It was a powerful reminder that sometimes the most necessary changes begin with a single act of courage, the willingness to disrupt comfortable patterns, to demand respect, to insist on being seen for who you truly are rather than who others expect you to be. As I headed to my suite for the night, I reflected on the lesson at the heart of this weekend. True success isn't measured by external validation or others' perceptions, but by the alignment between your work and your values, your authentic self and your daily actions. I had found that alignment in building Reservation, creating technology that genuinely improved experiences, that made human connections more meaningful. And now, unexpectedly, my family had found their way to seeing and appreciating that achievement on its own terms. Not because I had adapted to meet their expectations, but because they had expanded their understanding to recognize the value in my different path. That, perhaps, was the most meaningful success of all. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.